In the shadowed expanse of a world long forgotten by time, where glaciers stretched endlessly like frozen oceans under a sunless sky, there existed beings whose very presence defied the laws of nature. The air was so cold that even sound seemed reluctant to travel through it, each breath a visible plume of crystalline mist that hung suspended in the stillness before vanishing into nothingness. It was here, amidst this desolation of ice and silence, that they resided, the alien queens. They were not creatures born of this planet, but visitors whose origins remained as enigmatic as their purpose. Towering figures with forms both ethereal and grotesque, their translucent skin shimmered faintly beneath the pale glow of distant stars filtered through layers of ancient frost. Their faces held an otherworldly beauty, yet terror lurked within every curve and contour, for these beings possessed lips unlike any known to mortal kind. These were no ordinary mouths. They were instruments of power, capable of freezing everything they touched, air, water, flesh, with a single whisper. When they spoke, or when those lips parted even slightly, the temperature plummeted violently, and life itself recoiled from their icy embrace. Entire civilizations had fallen beneath their gaze, reduced to statues of frost-laden despair, their final screams forever trapped in frozen agony. The human male who stumbled into this realm did so unknowingly, his arrival marked only by the soft crunch of snow beneath boots worn thin by countless miles traversed across barren landscapes. He carried with him nothing but tattered clothes, a battered satchel containing scraps of food, and memories too painful to recall. His journey had been one of survival, driven by forces he could neither understand nor control, a relentless pull toward something undefined yet unshakable. Perhaps it was destiny, perhaps madness. Either way, it led him here, to the edge of existence, where reality blurred into myth. As he trudged deeper into the glacial wilderness, the man felt the first tendrils of unease creep over him. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional groan of shifting ice miles below the surface. Yet despite the chill seeping through his garments and biting at his exposed skin, there was something else, a warmth coiling deep within his chest, subtle yet undeniable. It puzzled him, this strange sensation, for logic dictated that such frigid surroundings should have left him numb, if not dead. And yet, with each step forward, the heat grew stronger, spreading outward like sunlight filtering through storm clouds. He attributed it at first to adrenaline, to the primal urge to survive against all odds. But as hours turned to days and the landscape became increasingly hostile, he realized it was more than mere instinct keeping him alive. The warmth shielded him somehow, cocooning him in its embrace while the world around him succumbed to the merciless grip of winter. Frost clung to his beard and eyebrows, icicles formed on the edges of his scarf, but inside, he burned, not with fever, but with a quiet fire that defied explanation. It was as though some unseen force recognized him, claimed him, protected him from the elements that sought to consume him whole. And then, one fateful evening, as twilight painted the horizon in hues of violet and gray, he saw them, shadows moving gracefully atop the ice, their movements fluid and hypnotic. They were far enough away that he might have dismissed them as mirages born of exhaustion, but their presence was unmistakable. The alien queens had found him, or perhaps they had always been watching, waiting for the moment he would cross into their domain. As they drew closer, their luminous forms casting eerie reflections on the frozen plains, the man felt his heart race, not with fear, but with an inexplicable sense of recognition. This was why he had come, though he could not say how he knew. All he understood was that his journey was far from over, and that whatever fate awaited him now rested upon the delicate balance between their lethal touch and the mysterious warmth that coursed through his veins. The air thickened as the queens approached, their movements synchronized like dancers performing an ancient ritual. Each step they took sent ripples of frost radiating outward, freezing the ground beneath their feet into intricate patterns resembling lacework carved from crystal. The man stood rooted in place, unable to move, yet strangely unafraid. His breath came in shallow gasps, clouding the space before him, but the warmth within him flared brighter, as though preparing for battle. He watched, transfixed, as the tallest of the queens halted just beyond arm's reach, her visage tilted downward to regard him with eyes that shimmered like liquid starlight. Her lips parted ever so slightly, revealing rows of needle-like teeth glistening with frost, and though no sound escaped her mouth, the temperature plummeted instantly. The frost crept up his legs, encasing his boots in solid ice, but still, the heat inside him pushed back, creating a barrier that refused to yield. Around him, the frozen tableau told a story of devastation. Trees petrified mid-sway, birds caught in flight, their wings transformed into jagged sculptures of glass. Even the wind itself seemed to freeze, hanging motionless in the air like invisible threads stretched taut. Yet the man remained untouched, his body a living contradiction to the deathly chill emanating from the queens. One of them extended a hand, her fingers elongated and tapered, brushing lightly against his cheek. Where her skin met his, a spark ignited, a burst of light so intense it blinded him momentarily. When his vision cleared, he saw that the frost clinging to his face had melted away, leaving behind a trail of steam that curled upward like smoke from embers. The queen withdrew her hand slowly, tilting her head as if studying a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. Her companions mirrored her curiosity, their expressions unreadable yet undeniably intent. The man swallowed hard, his throat dry despite the moisture condensing on his tongue. "Why?" he managed to croak, the word barely audible over the creak of shifting ice. Whether he meant why they hadn't killed him or why he alone resisted their power, he wasn't sure. But the question hung there, unanswered, as the queens exchanged glances that spoke volumes in their silent language. Then, without warning, the tallest queen leaned forward, her lips hovering inches from his ear. Though she did not speak aloud, her voice resonated directly within his mind, a symphony of whispers layered with tones both melodic and dissonant. "You are different," she said, her words wrapping around his thoughts like silk ribbons laced with thorns. "Warmth flows through you where others carry only cold. Tell us, what are you?" The inquiry was not accusatory but probing, as if she sought to peel back the layers of his existence to uncover the truth buried beneath. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. How could he explain something he didn't understand himself? Instead, he reached out hesitantly, his gloved hand trembling as it hovered near hers. She allowed the contact, her skin cool but not unbearable, and in that fleeting moment, images flooded his mind. Visions of worlds encased in eternal winter, of civilizations crumbling under the weight of ice, of queens standing sentinel over realms devoid of life. The scenes were overwhelming, yet strangely familiar, as though they belonged to a past he had forgotten or a future he was destined to shape. When the connection broke, the queens stepped back in unison, their forms flickering like candle flames caught in a draft. For the first time since encountering them, the man felt a pang of uncertainty. Were they allies, adversaries, or something altogether different? The warmth within him surged again, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat, and he realized it wasn't merely protecting him, it was communicating. Somehow, it knew the queens, recognized their essence, and responded to it in ways he couldn't comprehend. As the tallest queen raised her hand once more, this time pointing toward the horizon where the glacier stretched infinitely onward, he understood instinctively what she wanted. To follow. To continue. To discover. With the decision made, the man began walking, his steps slow but deliberate, guided by the towering figures who moved ahead of him like spectral guides. The terrain grew harsher with each passing hour, the ice beneath his feet becoming jagged and treacherous, clawing at his resolve with every misstep. Yet the warmth persisted, unwavering, fueling his determination as much as it shielded him from the biting cold. Around him, the landscape shifted subtly, revealing glimpses of structures half buried in the glacier, arches of ice carved into impossible shapes, spires reaching skyward like frozen prayers, and vast domes that shimmered faintly with an inner light. These remnants of a forgotten age hinted at a civilization that had thrived here long before the queens claimed dominion, their grandeur now entombed in frost. As they ventured deeper, the alien queens communicated less through gestures and more through the resonance of their presence. Their proximity filled the air with a hum, low and constant, vibrating through his bones and syncing with the rhythm of the warmth coursing through him. It was as though they were weaving a thread between them, binding him to their will without words. At times, he caught fragments of emotion bleeding through their stoic facades, curiosity tinged with caution, awe shadowed by apprehension, as if they too were navigating uncharted territory. The tallest queen, who seemed to lead the group, occasionally glanced back at him, her starlit eyes lingering longer than necessary, as though searching for something she feared losing. Hours bled into days, and the man's body began to betray signs of strain. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, and fatigue pulled at his limbs, yet the warmth within him acted as both anchor and lifeline, refusing to let him falter. During brief moments of rest, when the queens paused to observe the horizon or exchange silent deliberations, he noticed how the environment reacted to their presence. The ice beneath their feet pulsed faintly, glowing with colors that defied description, hues that danced between blue and silver, green and gold, as if the glacier itself were alive and responding to their power. Once, he dared to touch the glowing ice, and a surge of energy shot through his fingertips, flooding his mind with fragmented visions of battles fought and lost, of queens wielding their deadly gifts against invaders who sought to conquer their frozen realm. He recoiled, startled, but the tallest queen placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, steadying him as the memories faded. It was during one such pause that the man noticed a change in the queen's demeanor. They gathered closely together, their forms flickering more erratically than before, their movements tense and deliberate. The air around them crackled with anticipation, and the hum that accompanied their presence grew louder, almost deafening. Then, without warning, the tallest queen turned to face him fully, her expression unreadable yet suffused with urgency. She extended her hand again, but this time, instead of allowing him to approach, she pressed her palm firmly against his chest, directly over his heart. A jolt of energy surged through him, sharp and electric, causing him to stagger backward. For a moment, he thought he might collapse, but the warmth stabilized him, expanding outward until it enveloped him entirely. When the sensation subsided, he found himself staring at the queens, their forms shimmering with renewed intensity. They began moving again, faster now, their pace quickening as though propelled by some unseen force. The man followed, his legs carrying him forward almost involuntarily, driven by the same compulsion that had brought him here in the first place. Ahead, the glacier opened into a vast chasm, its walls lined with crystalline formations that refracted the dim starlight into a kaleidoscope of colors. Within the chasm lay a structure unlike anything he had seen before, a colossal temple of ice, its architecture both alien and achingly familiar, as though it had been built by hands that understood the secrets of creation itself. The queens ascended the steps leading to the temple's entrance, their movements fluid and unhurried, while the man trailed behind, his breath catching in his throat. The warmth within him roared to life, blazing fiercely as though recognizing the sanctity of the place. As he crossed the threshold, the air shifted, becoming heavier, charged with an energy that prickled his skin and set his teeth on edge. Inside, the walls glittered with embedded crystals, each one pulsing rhythmically, casting patterns of light that danced across the floor like living constellations. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, atop which rested an object shrouded in frost. The queens gathered around it, their forms flickering wildly now, their hums rising to a crescendo that reverberated through the chamber like a chorus of unseen voices. The tallest queen gestured for him to approach, her movements urgent yet deliberate. Hesitant but compelled, he stepped forward, the warmth within him surging with every step until it felt as though his very soul might ignite. When he reached the pedestal, the frost surrounding the object dissolved, revealing a crystalline orb that glowed with an inner light so pure it seemed to pierce through the fabric of reality itself. The man stared at it, awestruck, as the queens encircled him, their forms merging into a blur of light and shadow. In that moment, he understood that the orb was not merely an artifact. It was a key, a bridge between worlds, and perhaps the reason he had been drawn here. But understanding brought no clarity, only questions that echoed endlessly in his mind. What role did he play in this unfolding mystery? Was he meant to wield the orb, protect it, or destroy it? And what price would he pay for unraveling the secrets it held? The answers eluded him, slipping through his grasp like grains of sand in an hourglass, leaving him suspended in a liminal space where time and consequence blurred into insignificance. As the queen's hums crescendoed into a deafening roar, the man reached out, his fingers trembling as they brushed against the orb's surface. The warmth within him erupted, engulfing him in a blaze of light so intense it consumed everything, including the line between certainty and chaos. In the wake of the blinding luminescence, the man found himself adrift, untethered from the physical confines of the temple. The orb's energy coursed through him, intertwining with the warmth that had sustained him thus far, amplifying it into something vast and incomprehensible. Visions flooded his consciousness, not fragmented or fleeting as before, but vivid and immersive, pulling him into realms that defied logic and perception. He saw galaxies birthing stars, planets dissolving into cosmic dust, civilizations rising and falling in cycles too ancient to measure. Among these spectacles, recurring images of the alien queens emerged, not as rulers of frozen wastelands, but as guardians of balance, their powers both a blessing and a curse bestowed upon them by forces older than time itself. The tallest queen appeared most frequently in these visions, her form shifting between ethereal grace and raw, primal strength. She walked among ruins that predated even the buried structures of the glacier, her presence commanding reverence from beings whose shapes were indistinct yet unmistakably sentient. Through her eyes, the man witnessed rituals conducted beneath twin suns, ceremonies where the orb played a central role, its light weaving threads of harmony across fractured worlds. Yet alongside these moments of unity came scenes of conflict, queens battling invaders who wielded fire instead of ice, their clashes rending entire dimensions apart. Each victory came at a cost, etching sorrow into their luminous features, binding them further to the cycle of destruction and renewal. As the visions continued, the man began to sense a pattern, a rhythm underlying the chaos. The orb was more than a relic. It was a nexus, a point where timelines converged and diverged, shaping realities beyond comprehension. The queens guarded it not out of malice, but necessity, ensuring that its power remained contained lest it spiral out of control. But containment required sacrifice. Countless lives frozen in time, civilizations reduced to echoes, and the queens themselves trapped in an endless vigil. Their lethal touch, once perceived as cruel, revealed itself as a desperate act of preservation, a means to prevent the orb's energy from corrupting those unprepared to wield it. The realization struck him like a thunderclap. The warmth within him was not merely protection, it was resonance. He was attuned to the orb's frequency, his very essence vibrating in harmony with its core. This connection explained why he had survived where others perished, why the queens regarded him with equal parts curiosity and caution. Yet understanding brought no solace, for the implications weighed heavily on his soul. If he was tied to the orb, did that mean he was destined to take up the mantle of guardian? Or worse, was he meant to break the cycle entirely, risking everything to alter the course of existence? The hum of the queens grew louder, anchoring him back to the present. They surrounded him still, their forms now radiant with an intensity that bordered on unbearable. The tallest queen stepped forward, her expression inscrutable yet tinged with something akin to hope. She reached out, her hand hovering above the orb, and the man felt a pull, not physical, but existential, as if the universe itself urged him to act. His fingers twitched, yearning to grasp the orb fully, yet hesitation rooted him in place. What lay beyond this moment was unknown, a void filled with infinite possibilities, each one brimming with peril and promise. Time seemed to stretch, each second an eternity as the man wrestled with the enormity of his choice. The warmth within him pulsed steadily, neither pushing nor retreating, simply existing as a reminder of his connection to forces greater than himself. Around him, the crystalline walls of the temple shimmered, reflecting not only the light of the orb but also the weight of his indecision. The queens remained silent, their hums now a gentle murmur, as if granting him the space to decide. And so he stood, poised on the precipice of destiny, knowing that whatever path he chose would ripple outward, reshaping the cosmos in ways he could scarcely imagine. The man's gaze lingered on the orb, its glow pulsing in sync with the warmth within him. Each beat felt like a heartbeat, steady yet insistent, urging him to act. He glanced at the tallest queen, her starlit eyes reflecting both resolve and uncertainty, a mirror of his own turmoil. In that fleeting connection, he understood something profound. This moment wasn't just about him or the queens, it was about balance. The orb represented equilibrium, a fragile thread holding together threads of creation and destruction across countless realities. To take it would be to accept responsibility for maintaining that balance, or perhaps breaking it altogether. His hand trembled as he reached out again, fingertips brushing against the orb's surface. This time, instead of a surge of energy, there was a soft hum, almost melodic, resonating through his bones. It wasn't aggressive but inviting, as if the orb recognized him not as an intruder but as part of its design. The warmth inside him swelled, wrapping around the sensation like water meeting fire, creating steam that seemed to rise beyond physical form. His vision blurred momentarily, and when clarity returned, he saw fragments of himself intertwined with the orb, not as separate entities, but as one unified force. The tallest queen stepped closer, her movements deliberate, almost ceremonial. She placed her hand over his, their palms pressing lightly against the orb. A jolt of energy shot through them both, rippling outward in waves that illuminated the chamber. The other queens formed a circle around them, their forms shimmering brighter than ever before, their hums merging into a single harmonious tone that vibrated through every molecule of air. For the first time, the man felt no fear, only awe, reverence, and an overwhelming sense of purpose. As the energy continued to flow, memories flooded his mind once more, but these were different from the earlier visions. They weren't scenes of cosmic battles or ancient rituals. They were glimpses of potential futures. In some, he stood alongside the queens, guiding the orb's power to heal fractured worlds. In others, he wielded its energy recklessly, unraveling entire dimensions in his quest for control. And then there were darker visions, ones where he refused the mantle entirely, leaving the orb untended as chaos consumed reality itself. Each possibility weighed heavily on him, forcing him to confront not only what he could do but who he wanted to become. The tallest queen withdrew her hand slowly, leaving his resting gently atop the orb. Her expression softened, though her gaze remained piercing. Without words, she communicated a truth so profound it transcended language. The choice was his alone. No matter how attuned he was to the orb, no matter how much the warmth within him resonated with its essence, the burden of action rested solely on his shoulders. The queens had guarded the orb for eons, sacrificing themselves endlessly, but their role was shifting now. Whether by fate or chance, the man had been drawn into their cycle, and his decision would determine whether that cycle continued, or ended. He closed his eyes, drawing a deep breath despite the icy air. The warmth pulsed once more, stronger than before, as if affirming its presence. When he opened his eyes, the world around him seemed sharper, clearer, as though the veil between what was and what could be had thinned. He looked down at the orb again, its light casting intricate patterns across the crystalline floor. The patterns shifted subtly, forming shapes that resembled constellations, maps of possibilities stretching infinitely outward. With a final exhale, the man tightened his grip on the orb. It didn't resist or fight back. Instead, it yielded to his touch, its energy flowing into him like a river meeting the sea. The warmth within him expanded exponentially, filling every corner of his being until he thought he might burst. Yet even as the power surged, it brought clarity rather than chaos. He saw the interconnectedness of all things, the delicate web of existence held together by forces invisible yet undeniable. And within that web, he found his place. The queen's hums crescendoed, rising to a pitch that reverberated through the temple walls. Cracks began to form in the ice surrounding them, glowing faintly with the same light emanating from the orb. The man realized what was happening. The temple itself was responding to the shift in energy, reshaping to accommodate the new dynamic. The frozen chasm outside groaned and shifted, glaciers calving into the abyss below as if heralding the dawn of something unprecedented. The tallest queen stepped back, her form flickering like a flame caught in a draft. She bowed her head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement, and perhaps gratitude. The other queens followed suit, their movements synchronized as they dissolved into streams of light that spiraled upward, merging with the cracks in the ceiling. As they disappeared, the hum faded, leaving behind an eerie silence broken only by the distant rumble of collapsing ice. Alone now, the man stood amidst the ruins of the temple, the orb cradled in his hands. Its glow had dimmed slightly, as if conserving its strength, but its presence was undeniable. He felt the weight of it, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. The warmth within him still burned brightly, intertwining with the orb's energy in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. But one thing was certain: he was no longer merely a wanderer lost in a frozen wasteland. He was something more, something greater. The man stepped out of the crumbling temple, the orb cradled carefully in his arms. The glacier around him had transformed, its once static expanse now alive with movement and light. Ice formations shimmered like liquid diamonds, their surfaces rippling as though breathing. Above, the cracks in the sky widened, revealing glimpses of stars that seemed closer than before, their light piercing through the veil of frost-laden clouds. The air hummed faintly, carrying echoes of the queen's departure, a symphony of whispers that lingered on the edge of hearing. He walked slowly, each step deliberate, as if the ground beneath him might shatter under the weight of what he carried. The warmth within him pulsed steadily, keeping pace with the rhythm of his thoughts. He could feel the orb's energy reaching outward, touching the world around him, reshaping it subtly but unmistakably. Frost melted where his shadow fell, revealing patches of earth long buried beneath centuries of ice. Tiny shoots of greenery pushed through the thawing soil, fragile yet defiant, heralding life's return to a land that had known only stillness and death. But the transformation wasn't without cost. As the glacier shifted, So too did the balance of the realm. The groaning of ancient ice grew louder, accompanied by tremors that shook the ground beneath his feet. Avalanches cascaded down distant slopes, sending plumes of snow and debris into the air. The man paused, looking back at the temple, now almost entirely consumed by collapsing ice. It was as if the glacier itself were reclaiming its territory, erasing all traces of the Queen's sanctuary. Yet even as destruction unfolded, there was beauty in the chaos, a reminder that endings often birth new beginnings. The orb's glow intensified, responding to the turmoil around them. Its light spilled over the landscape, illuminating hidden details. Carvings etched into the ice walls, remnants of structures older than memory, and faint outlines of paths leading deeper into the frozen wilderness. The man realized these weren't random artifacts but markers, clues left behind by those who had come before. Perhaps they were meant for him, guiding him toward whatever lay ahead. As he followed one such path, the warmth within him began to change. It no longer felt like an external force coexisting with his body. Instead, it merged with his very essence, becoming indistinguishable from his own heartbeat. The boundary between himself and the orb blurred, until he could no longer tell where he ended and it began. This unity brought clarity, not just about the orb's purpose, but about his own. He understood now why he had been drawn here, why the warmth had protected him, and why the queens had entrusted him with their legacy. It wasn't destiny or chance, it was necessity. The orb needed someone willing to carry its burden, not out of obligation, but out of love for the delicate web of existence it sustained. Hours passed, or perhaps days. The passage of time had become irrelevant. The path led him to a precipice overlooking an immense valley, its floor obscured by swirling mists. Beyond the mist, towering peaks rose like jagged teeth against the horizon, their summits glowing faintly with the same starlight that illuminated the orb. At the center of the valley stood a structure unlike anything he had seen before, a spire of translucent crystal, impossibly tall and slender, pulsing with a light that matched the orb's glow. It was both alien and achingly familiar, as if it had been waiting for him since the dawn of time. The man approached cautiously, the orb's energy resonating with the spire's presence. As he drew closer, the mists parted, revealing a vast network of crystalline pathways radiating outward from the base of the spire. Each pathway seemed to lead to a different part of the glacier, branching off into countless directions. He sensed that this place was more than a monument. It was a nexus, a hub connecting countless realities, much like the orb itself. And standing at its heart, he felt the full weight of his responsibility settle over him. He knelt at the base of the spire, placing the orb gently on the ground. Its glow flared brightly, illuminating the intricate patterns carved into the crystal surface. Slowly, the orb began to rise, floating upward until it merged seamlessly with the spire. The resulting surge of energy was overwhelming, washing over him in waves of light and sound. He closed his eyes, letting the sensation envelop him, feeling every thread of existence intertwine with his consciousness. When he opened his eyes again, the world had changed. The glacier was no longer barren and desolate. It teemed with life, its icy plains dotted with vibrant flora and fauna adapted to the harsh environment. The air was crisp but breathable, filled with the songs of birds and the rustle of unseen creatures moving through the underbrush. Even the stars above seemed brighter, their light casting a gentle glow over the land. Yet the man knew this transformation came at a price. The queens were gone, their forms dispersed into the fabric of reality, forever bound to the cycle they had guarded for millennia. Their sacrifice weighed heavily on him, a reminder of the fragility of balance and the cost of maintaining it. But he also felt their presence lingering, woven into the very essence of the orb and the spire, a silent promise that they would always be with him, guiding him when the path grew uncertain. The man stood, gazing out over the transformed landscape. His journey was far from over. He could feel it in the pulse of the warmth within him, now inseparable from the orb's energy. There were still questions unanswered, mysteries unsolved, and worlds beyond this one that needed protecting. But for the first time, he faced them not with fear or hesitation, but with resolve. He was no longer just a wanderer or a survivor. He was a guardian, a keeper of balance, and a weaver of possibilities. And so, with the spire glowing softly behind him, he set off down one of the crystalline pathways, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The glacier stretched endlessly before him, its beauty both haunting and hopeful. The wind whispered through the frost-kissed air, carrying fragments of the Queen's hums, a melody that would forever echo in his heart. He walked onward, into the unknown, carrying the warmth and the weight of eternity.